The radio crackles with desperation. 3 words cut through the static. This is blackjack. It's 02:47 hours on the night of October 23rd, 1944, somewhere in the Hurtgen Forest along the German-Belgian border. 42 men from Easy Company, 502nd Parachute Infantry Regiment, are pinned down in a bombed-out farmhouse 3 kilometers behind enemy lines. They've been there for 16 hours. The Germans know exactly where they are. Major William Hendricks stands in the command tent, his face illuminated by the map light, listening to Captain Frank Morrison's voice deteriorate from confident to desperate over the course of 3 transmissions. Morrison's men jumped yesterday at dawn as part of a reconnaissance mission that went catastrophically wrong. Intelligence said the area was lightly defended. Intelligence was catastrophically wrong. An entire SS Panzergrenadier battalion had moved into the sector just 12 hours before the drop. "We've got 8 wounded who can't walk," Morrison's voice crackles. "Ammunition for maybe 2 more hours. They're bringing up armor. Request immediate extraction." The numbers are brutal and undeniable. 2 previous rescue attempts have failed. Charlie Company lost 11 men trying to punch through at dusk. A tank platoon from the 3rd Armored got within 800 meters before German 88s knocked out 2 Shermans and sent the rest retreating. The kill zone is a meat grinder of overlapping machine gun fire, mortar positions, and at least 4 anti-tank guns positioned on the high ground. Hendricks makes the calculation every commander dreads. He can send another company and lose maybe 30 men with only a 20% chance of success. Or he can wait until dawn when air support arrives, by which time Morrison's men will likely be dead or captured. He chooses neither. "We wait for first light," he tells his staff. "Get the fighter bombers up at 600. What Major Hendricks doesn't know is that 400 meters away, a 22-year-old private named Danny Sullivan is lying awake in his tent, listening to every word through the canvas walls. Sullivan knows that farmhouse. He grew up on one just like it in rural Pennsylvania. He knows the terrain because his platoon patrolled that exact sector 2 weeks ago. And Danny Sullivan has an idea that will get him court-martialed. Or make him a hero. Probably both. To understand why nobody believed Danny Sullivan could save those paratroopers, you need to understand who Danny Sullivan was, or more importantly, who he wasn't. Private First Class Daniel James Sullivan enlisted in the Army on his 18th birthday in March 1942, 3 months after Pearl Harbor. He washed out of officer candidate school after 6 weeks. Too impulsive, his instructors wrote, doesn't follow established procedures, shows poor judgment under pressure. He failed paratrooper training twice, once for a landing injury, once for insubordination when he questioned why they were sore. Jumping into a training zone he considered tactically unsound. He was right about the tactical assessment, which somehow made his superiors even angrier. By October 1944, Sullivan had been with the 3rd Armored Division's support company for 8 months, working as a clerk and occasional mechanics assistant. His personnel file contained 3 letters of reprimand, 2 Article 15s for minor infractions, and exactly 0 commendations. His own platoon sergeant, Staff Sergeant Earl Mackey, once told him, "Sullivan, you think too much and listen too little. That's going to get you killed or get someone else killed." The Army had tried everything conventional to reach Morrison's paratroopers. The daylight assault at 14:30 hours had been textbook. Infantry advancing behind artillery, tank support, proper reconnaissance. Result, 11 casualties, 0 progress. The armored thrust at 17:30 hours followed every principle in the tank warfare manual. Result, 2 destroyed Shermans, 3 crew members dead, the rest forced back. Every senior officer at the division level agreed on one thing. A night rescue was suicide. The terrain made it impossible. The farmhouse sat in a narrow valley with a single approach road flanked by dense forest on both sides. The Germans had spent all day fortifying the position. They'd positioned MG-42 machine gun nests to create a crossfire that covered every meter of the approach. Mortar crews had pre-registered fire coordinates. The 80mm anti-tank guns were dug in on the ridgeline with perfect fields of fire. Colonel James Thornton, the division's senior armor officer, put it simply in the evening briefing. "Gentlemen, that valley is a kill box. Any vehicle we send in at night will be blind. They'll hear us coming a kilometer away. Even if, by some miracle, a tank reached the farmhouse, how do you extract 40 men? They can't all fit inside. They'd have to walk out behind the tank exposed while taking fire from 3 sides. We'd lose the tank, the crew, and the men we're trying to save." The experts were unanimous. The textbooks were clear. The consensus was absolute. Wait for dawn. Wait for air support. Accept that some men might die, but don't compound the tragedy with more deaths. What none of them considered was that Private Danny Sullivan had never read the textbooks. He'd spent 6 months as a mechanic's assistant, which meant he knew that 3 Sherman tanks were sitting in the motor pool just 200 meters from his tent, fully fueled and ready for tomorrow's mission. He'd spent 2 weeks patrolling that sector, which meant he knew there was a logging trail, barely wide enough for a tank, that approached the farmhouse from the northeast, an angle the Germans probably weren't watching as heavily because everyone assumed it was impassable. And Sullivan had something else the experts lacked. He'd listened to Captain Morrison's voice over that radio. Morrison was from Pennsylvania, too. He'd mentioned it once during a joint training exercise. Morrison had a wife named Sarah and a 4-year-old daughter named Emma. Sullivan had seen the photograph. At 0315 hours, while Major Hendricks slept and the motor pool guard was on the far side of the compound checking a perimeter report, Danny Sullivan made a decision that would either save 40 lives or end his own. He was going to steal a tank. Danny Sullivan stands in the shadows 50 meters from the motor pool, watching Corporal Jenkins, the night guard, make his rounds. Jenkins is predictable. Every 20 minutes he walks the full perimeter, which takes him out of sight of the tanks for approximately 4 minutes. Sullivan waits. His heart hammers against his ribs. This is insane. This is court-martial insane. This is potentially firing squad insane. But Captain Morrison has maybe 90 minutes before the Germans assault that farmhouse, and Sullivan knows with absolute certainty that the logging trail approach could work. He'd found it 2 weeks ago while his squad was setting up an observation post. Everyone else walked right past it, dismissing it as too narrow, too overgrown. But Sullivan grew up driving his father's tractor through Pennsylvania timber country. He knows what a tank can push through. He measured it with his eyes. 7 feet wide, maybe 8. A Sherman is 9 feet 8 inches wide. Tight, but possible. 0322 hours. Jenkins disappears around the eastern edge of the motor pool. Sullivan moves. He's across the open ground in 15 seconds, ducking between 2 half-tracks. The 3 Sherman tanks sit in a row, dark and silent. He knows which one to take. The M4A3E8 on the left, the one Sergeant Kowalski's crew calls lucky because it survived 4 months without a mechanical failure. More importantly, Sullivan helped service it yesterday. He knows it's fueled, armed, and mechanically sound. The hatch is unlocked. Tankers in a rear area motor pool don't lock their hatches because who's stupid enough to steal a 30-ton tank? Sullivan hauls himself up, his boots clanging softly on the hull. He drops through the turret hatch into the commander's position, then slides forward into the driver's seat. The interior smells of oil, cordite, and the stale sweat of 100 missions. His hands find the controls in the darkness, 6 months of watching tank crews has taught him more than he realized. He knows the startup sequence: battery on, fuel pump, wait for pressure. The radial engine requires a specific ignition procedure. Engage the primer, count to 3, hit the starter. The starter grinds. The engine coughs once, dies. Sullivan's hands are shaking. Jenkins will be back in 90 seconds. He tries again. Primer, count, starter. The Wright R975 radial engine roars to life with a sound like rolling thunder. 9 cylinders, 400 horsepower. A sound that will wake every man in the compound. Sullivan doesn't hesitate. There's no going back now. He releases the brake, engages the transmission, and the 33-ton Sherman lurches forward with a mechanical groan. Behind him, men are shouting. In front of him, the motor pool gate is closed but not locked. He aims the tank directly at it. The Sherman hits the gate at 8 miles per hour. Wood and metal explode outward. An alarm bell starts ringing somewhere. Sullivan shifts to second gear and accelerates toward the tree line. He has approximately 3 minutes before someone organizes a pursuit. He has approximately 90 minutes to save 40 men, and he has absolutely no authority, no backup, and no plan beyond drive fast and don't get killed. The logging trail is worse than Sullivan remembered. The Sherman crashes through underbrush at 15 miles per hour, tree branches screaming against the hull like fingernails on steel. Sullivan navigates by moonlight, filtering through the canopy, one hand on the left steering lever, the other on the right, constantly adjusting to keep the 33-ton beast from sliding off the trail into the ravine. He's alone, completely, terrifyingly alone. A Sherman tank has a crew of 5, commander, gunner, loader, driver, and assistant driver. Sullivan is one man trying to do all 5 jobs simultaneously. He can't fire the main gun. That requires someone in the turret. He can't operate the radio properly while driving. He can't even see where he's shooting if he tries to use the bow machine gun. The tank prototype doctrine from Fort Knox in 1940 was clear. A tank is a crew-served weapon system. One man operating a Sherman is like one man trying to fly a bomber. Theoretically possible, suicidally impractical. But Sullivan isn't thinking about doctrine. He's thinking about the map he memorized, the terrain he walked 2 weeks ago, and the fact that Morrison's paratroopers have approximately 70 minutes of ammunition remaining. 3 or 48 hours. The trail widens slightly. Through the driver's periscope, Sullivan catches his first glimpse of the valley and immediately understands why the previous rescue attempts failed. The farmhouse sits in a natural bowl surrounded by higher ground on 3 sides. German positions dot the ridgelines like teeth. Sullivan counts at least 6 muzzle flashes from machine guns, all concentrated on the southern approach where the main road enters the valley. Mortar rounds walk across the farmhouse's position in steady patterns. Tracer rounds arc through the darkness like deadly fireworks. Morrison's men are still fighting, still alive. Sullivan's approach from the northeast puts him 800 meters from the farmhouse with minimal German positions between him and the objective. But there's a problem. The logging trail ends in 200 meters at a creek bed. After that, it's open ground. The Sherman will be exposed. The Germans will hear the engine. Every anti-tank gun in the valley will pivot toward the sound. Sullivan pulls to a stop, engine idling, and thinks. For the first time since stealing the tank, he considers what happens if he's wrong. If the Germans have more firepower than he estimated, if the Sherman throws a track crossing the creek, if he reaches the farmhouse but can't get the paratroopers out. Behind him, back at the American lines, he knows men are organizing a pursuit. Major Hendricks has probably ordered his arrest. Military police are probably mobilizing. If he turns back now, he faces court-martial but survives. If he goes forward, he either saves 40 men or dies trying. Sullivan thinks about his own father, killed in a factory accident when Danny was 16. His father's last words to him: when you see something that needs doing and nobody else will do it, you do it. You don't ask permission. You don't wait for someone else. You just do it. Sullivan shifts the Sherman into first gear. 0352 hours. He crashes through the creek bed in a spray of water and accelerates toward the farmhouse at full speed. The Germans hear him coming. The radio in Sullivan's stolen Sherman crackles to life at 0353 hours. Unidentified armor unit, this is Blackjack 6. Identify yourself immediately. Major William Hendricks stands in the command tent, surrounded by staff officers who look like they've seen a ghost. 3 minutes ago, a private soldier named Danny Sullivan committed what might be the most audacious act of theft in military history. Now that same stolen Sherman is somehow broadcasting on the battalion frequency while driving through German-held territory. Blackjack 6, this is... Sullivan's voice crackles with static and engine noise. This is that private who took your tank, sir. I'm about 2 minutes from the farmhouse. I'm going to get those paratroopers out. The room erupts. What? Lieutenant Colonel Thornton, the senior armor officer, lunges for the radio. That's suicide. You don't have a crew. You can't operate that tank alone. Turn that vehicle around immediately. Captain Wade, the MP commander, shouts. That's a direct order. You'll be killed. Hendricks grabs the microphone. Sullivan, listen to me. The Germans have that entire valley covered. We have fighter bombers coming at dawn. Turn around. That's an order. Sullivan's voice comes back, barely audible over the roar of the Sherman's engine. Sir, with respect, those men don't have until dawn. I heard Morrison's last transmission. They've got maybe an hour of ammunition. And I know a route the Germans aren't covering. I've already made it 90% of the way there. You made it through the logging trail? Thornton looks genuinely shocked. That trail's barely 6 feet wide in places. 7 feet, sir. I measured it. A Sherman's 9.8. But if you fold in the track guards and don't mind scratching the paint, this is insane. Thornton turns to Hendricks. Sir, we need to order artillery to block his route. If the Germans capture that Sherman intact, they'll use it against us. We can't let... Belay that, Hendricks says quietly. Everyone in the tent freezes. Sir? Thornton's voice is dangerous. That private just stole a 33-ton tank. He's compromising a multi-million-dollar asset. He's operating without authorization in a combat zone. He could trigger a German counterattack that... He's also about to do something we said was impossible. Hendricks interrupts. He's staring at the map, running calculations. How far is he from the objective? A young lieutenant checks the coordinates. If he's where he says he is... 600 meters, sir. The radio crackles again. Blackjack 6, I need you to do something for me. Tell Captain Morrison I'm coming in from the northeast. Have his men ready to move in 2 minutes. I can't stop. If I stop, I'm a sitting duck. They need to be ready to mount up the second I arrive. Mount up? Captain Morrison's voice suddenly cuts in on the same frequency. Son, you can't fit 40 men inside a Sherman. No, sir, but I can fit them on top. Hull, turret, engine deck. I've seen refugees riding tanks through France. You can pack maybe 15 on the outside if they hold on tight. I'll make 2 trips. 2 trips? Thornton is aghast. The Germans will be waiting for... It's the only way, sir, Sullivan interrupts. Unless you've got a better idea in the next 90 seconds. The room falls silent. Every man in that tent knows Sullivan is right. Every conventional approach has failed. Every textbook solution has been tried. What Sullivan is attempting is tactically insane, mechanically improbable, and completely unauthorized. It's also the only chance Morrison's men have. Hendricks looks at Thornton. Thornton looks at the map. The clock reads 0355 hours. God help me, Hendricks mutters. Then, into the microphone. Morrison, get your men ready. Sullivan, You have one chance at this. Make it count. Yes, sir. Oh, and sir? What? I'm really sorry about the gate at the motor pool. I'll pay for repairs if I make it back. If you're enjoying this story of one soldier's impossible decision, hit that subscribe button. We're just getting to the most intense part. This is the moment where everything Danny Sullivan believed about courage and duty gets tested under fire. The Sherman explodes from the tree line at 0356 hours, and every German position within 800 meters opens fire simultaneously. Sullivan sees the muzzle flashes before he hears the impacts. A dozen MG-42 machine guns stitching tracers across the darkness, mortar rounds already in flight, and somewhere on the ridgeline, an 80-20mm anti-tank gun tracking his movement. The machine gun rounds are mosquito bites against the Sherman's armor. Ping, 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 ping. The sound of 7.92mm bullets ricocheting off 3 inches of steel. Sullivan keeps the accelerator. Floored. The radial engine screaming at maximum RPM. 33 tons of American steel racing across 600 meters of open ground at 26 miles per hour. The first 88mm round misses by 10 feet, detonating in a fountain of dirt to his left. The concussion rocks the tank. Sullivan corrects, zigzagging as much as the Sherman's bulk allows. Drivers are taught to never move in straight lines under fire. Make yourself unpredictable. Make the gunner guess. 400 meters to the farmhouse. A mortar round hits 20 feet ahead, directly in his path. Sullivan doesn't slow down. The Sherman crashes through the crater, suspension screaming, track links groaning. For one terrifying second, the nose dips, and Sullivan thinks the tank will flip. But the engine's weight pulls them through and up the opposite side. The second 88mm round hits. The explosion is apocalyptic. The round strikes the Sherman's right front slope armor at 2,800 feet per second and bounces. The German gunner's angle was too shallow. Instead of penetrating, the shell ricochets upward, tearing off the right side fender and one of the track guards in a shower of sparks. Sullivan barely notices. The Sherman's still moving, engine still running, tracks still turning. 200 meters. He can see the farmhouse now through the driver's periscope, a dark silhouette punctuated by muzzle flashes from Morrison's men returning fire. He can see shapes moving, men getting ready. The Germans realize what's happening. The machine gun fire intensifies, shifting from the farmhouse to the approaching tank. Hundreds of rounds per minute, hammering the hull, the turret, the engine deck. None penetrate, but the sound inside the tank is deafening. A metallic hailstorm that makes thinking almost impossible. 100 meters. Sullivan spots the German squad between him and the objective. 8 men in a shallow trench. One of them leveling a Panzerfaust anti-tank rocket launcher. The Panzerfaust-shaped charge warhead can punch through 4 inches of armor at close range. At this distance, it's lethal. Sullivan does the only thing he can do. He aims the Sherman directly at the trench and hits the accelerator harder. The German with the Panzerfaust fires. The rocket-propelled grenade launches with a flash and a whoosh, and passes 3 feet over the Sherman's turret, missing because the tank was closer and moving faster than the soldier anticipated. The Sherman doesn't miss. 33 tons traveling at 26 miles per hour hits the German trench like a meteor strike. Men scatter. The tank crashes through and over the position, track links grinding across soil and sandbags. 50 meters. Sullivan triggers the hull-mounted 30 caliber machine gun, firing blind, spraying bullets across the German positions to his right. He has no idea if he's hitting anything, but the psychological effect is immediate. Tracer fire forces the Germans to dive for cover, disrupting their aim for precious seconds. 20 meters. Sullivan slams the brakes. The Sherman skids to a stop in a spray of gravel, the hull now between the farmhouse and the primary German positions. 33 tons of mobile cover. Go! 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 Morrison's voice over the radio, not bothering with call signs or protocol. Sullivan throws open his hatch and emerges into hell. The noise is overwhelming. Machine gun fire, mortar explosions, men shouting, the Sherman's engine roaring at idle. Paratroopers pour from the shattered farmhouse. Not 42 men, Sullivan realizes, but maybe 35. The rest are casualties, dead or too wounded to move. On the tank! Move! Morrison is everywhere, grabbing men, shoving them toward the Sherman. They scramble up the hull, finding handholds on the turret, the engine deck, the track guards. Hands grip steel, bodies pressed together. A mortar round lands 15 feet away. Shrapnel pings off the tank. One paratrooper screams and falls. Morrison drags him up, blood streaming from the man's leg, and literally throws him onto the engine deck where 2 other soldiers grab him. Sullivan counts heads. 15. 16. 17 men clinging to the Sherman like barnacles on a ship's hull. That's all who can fit, Morrison shouts, hauling himself up beside the turret. Go! What about the others? Sullivan yells back. I'm staying. Get these men out and come back for us. There's no time to argue. Sullivan drops back into the driver's seat and shifts into reverse. The Sherman lurches backward, and Sullivan hears men shouting, gripping tighter. He can't see behind him. The driver's periscope only faces forward, so he navigates by memory, praying he doesn't hit a crater or a ditch that would throw men off the tank. The Germans have figured out what's happening. The 88mm gunner is tracking their movement. Sullivan sees the muzzle flash a split second before the round arrives. The shell passes 6 inches over the turret. Sullivan feels the pressure wave, hears one of the paratroopers scream, but nobody falls off. He shifts into forward gear and accelerates back the way he came, 17 men clinging desperately to a speeding tank while German fire chases them across 800 meters of open ground. The return trip takes 90 seconds that feel like 90 hours. Sullivan zigzags. Mortar rounds explode left and right. Machine gun tracers arc through the darkness. The Sherman takes hit after hit, armor sparking, paint scorching, but the engine keeps running and the tracks keep turning. At 0403 hours, the Sherman crashes back into the American lines. Medics swarm the tank immediately, pulling wounded paratroopers down, rushing them to aid stations. The 17 men Sullivan just rescued stagger away from the tank on shaking legs. One of them, a sergeant with a blood-soaked bandage around his head, turns back and salutes the Sherman. Sullivan doesn't see it. He's already turning the tank around. What are you doing? Hendricks is suddenly beside the tank, having run from the command tent. Sullivan looks down at him from the commander's hatch. Sir, there's still 18 men back there. Captain Morrison stayed behind. Sullivan, you've already... I'm going back, sir, with or without permission. Hendricks stares at him for 3 seconds. Then, load him up with ammunition. Get a crew. No time, sir. They're down to maybe 20 minutes of ammo. Sullivan drops back into the tank before Hendricks can respond. The Sherman lurches forward, back toward the logging trail, back toward the valley, back toward the 18 men still trapped in that farmhouse. Behind him, Hendricks turns to his staff officers. Get artillery ready to provide covering fire, and get me those fighter bombers early. I don't care if you have to wake up Eisenhower himself. Before we show you how this impossible rescue ends, take 2 seconds to like this video. It helps us share stories of courage, like Danny Sullivan's, with more people. Now, here's what happened on that second run. The second trip was worse. Sullivan emerged from the tree line at 0414 hours to find the Germans had repositioned. They knew where he was coming from now. They knew what he was trying to do. The 88mm gun had moved to a better angle. 2 more machine gun nests had been established along his route, but something else had changed too. American artillery had opened fire. Hendricks had committed every gun in range to suppressing the German positions. The ridge lines erupted in explosions. And overhead, early, impossibly early, Sullivan heard the distinctive roar of P-47 Thunderbolts diving from 8,000 feet, their 50-caliber machine guns tearing apart German emplacements. The Sherman made the 800-meter dash in 3 minutes. Morrison and 17 paratroopers scrambled onto the hull, turret, and engine deck. One man was barely conscious, held in place by his friends. Sullivan could hear them praying as he accelerated back toward American lines. The 88mm fired one last shot. It struck the Sherman's left track, and Sullivan felt the sickening lurch as the track broke. The tank slewed left, grinding to a halt 200 meters from friendly lines. "Everybody off!" Sullivan screamed. "Run!" The paratroopers jumped, stumbled, ran through the pre-dawn darkness while German fire chased them. Sullivan climbed out last, abandoned the crippled Sherman, and sprinted behind them. They all made it, every single one. 35 paratroopers evacuated, 0 killed during the extraction, 8 wounded, all of whom survived, and 1 very unauthorized private who had just committed what would later be described as the most spectacular act of insubordination and heroism in the division's history. The court-martial hearing lasted 15 minutes. The Medal of Honor ceremony lasted longer. Private First Class Danny Sullivan, promoted 3 ranks to Staff Sergeant on the spot, received America's highest military decoration on November 8, 1944. Major Hendricks personally recommended it. Captain Morrison testified. All 17 paratroopers from the first trip wrote statements. Sullivan's response when they pinned the medal on his chest, "I just did what needed doing, sir." After the war, Sullivan returned to Pennsylvania and never spoke publicly about that night. He worked as a mechanic for 40 years, raised 3 children, and died quietly in 1989 at age 67. His Medal of Honor sits in the Smithsonian. The battered helmet he wore during the rescue sits in his grandson's living room in Pittsburgh. The broken Sherman, the one Sullivan abandoned 200 meters from American lines, was recovered 2 days later and sent to a repair depot. It was rebuilt, returned to service, and fought in 7 more major engagements before the war ended. Tankers who served in it later reported that it never suffered a mechanical failure. They called it the Lucky Tank. Captain Frank Morrison survived the war, returned home to Pennsylvania, and named his second daughter, born in 1946, Danielle. Military historians still debate whether Sullivan's action was brilliant improvisation or reckless endangerment. Tank doctrine manuals now include a footnote about single-operator emergency procedures inspired by that night. The logging trail Sullivan used has been preserved as part of a military historical park in Belgium. But perhaps the most important legacy came in 1987, when a reporter finally convinced Sullivan to speak about the rescue. The reporter asked him if he'd do it again, knowing it was unauthorized, knowing it could have gotten him killed. Sullivan thought for a long moment. Then he pulled out a worn photograph, 43 men standing together, all of them gray-haired now, all of them smiling at a reunion in 1985. "These men got to go home," Sullivan said quietly. "They got to have families, careers, lives, all because someone broke the rules one night in 1944. He paused. "So yes, I'd do it again. Every time." The lesson isn't about breaking rules. It's about understanding that sometimes courage means acting when everyone else says to wait, going forward when everyone else says it's impossible, and caring more about what's right than what's safe. Danny Sullivan didn't ask permission. He didn't wait for approval. He saw men who needed help, and he helped them. Sometimes that's what heroism looks like. One ordinary person deciding that impossible just means nobody's tried hard enough yet.